superhumans out there. Welcome to Energetically Speaking. And with me today is my fellow associate, QHHT practitioner and good friend, Lorinda Carr. How are you, Lorinda?
Doing well. Happy to be here again. This is I love having our chats.
I do too. To the listener, we are both QHHT practitioners, and we are bringing to you some extraordinary things that happen in our work. And Lorinda and I have teamed up. I do the energy healing and clearing prior to the QHHT sessions. As a QHHT practitioner myself, I have actually blended some modalities together that help clean up the mind, the body, and the spirit complex, which we have found over time has caused people to get into a deeper, richer experience when they go through their QHHT session. And today we're going to be talking about a couple of really awesome examples of blueprints, imprints, overlays, and oh my, what else would come out? So, I believe it was a couple of weeks ago or so, Lorinda and I had a couple come to us, and they had some extraordinary experiences with us. And we're going to be talking about that now.
This really cool this really amazing couple, which out of respect and privacy, we will not mention their names. Had been doing a lot of. They'd come to you first. They were doing a lot of work energetically. One of them had been really coming into their spirituality and doing a lot of research and just kind of down the rabbit hole, but realizing had been in corporate America their entire life, like pretty much just like money, money, money driven. And finally has come into this spiritual aspect of their life. And their spouse is same parallel journey, but not the same path. It's quite fascinating to see the dynamic between the two of them. And I had seen one of them first, and we had done a lot of healing. Well, I should say first, you saw them first. You had identified a number of things that were going on and had moved things. And I tell you what, I have to say, just as per usual, they both, when it came time for their sessions, went under almost immediately. Like I could have skipped majority of the induction. Like there was no, because full disclosure, a lot of the induction is really mundane, boring stuff. And I'm pretty sure that's just to get the person bored and to like, okay, well, they're going to talk for a minute and get them into that, a little bit slower, slow them down. Right. They both almost went immediately. I could have just skipped. Like, you see a red bird? Yes. Gone. Like it's just gone. But they both
it is extraordinary. I don't mean to cut you off, but I think it's important for the listener to understand, especially those people who suffer from depression and anxiety. And being somebody who had anxiety, working in corporate America for many years, I was the typical cat hanging from the ceiling. And the person who did the induction on me had to go through it 7 times because I was so wound up. I could not relax enough to get into the experience. And so a few years back, Lorinda and I actually had the question, what if we did energy clearing first and then do the QHHT session, which is why we've kind of put everything together. And with this particular couple, one of the persons did have a lot of anxiety to the point where it was really shifting how she lived in her life. And so when we moved that energy out, she didn't feel good for a while. I mean, I tell people if you're going to do energy healing, don't take this lightly. It is not for the faint of heart because several things could happen. Your body could purge. You become more emotional. The symptoms that you have physically may become more acute, all the above, or maybe nothing. But you just don't know how it's going to hit you. And it hit her in a big way. But by the time she saw you, Lorinda, she was able to relax to the point where she went down really, really quickly. And this is why we merge the modalities. Both of us understanding how QHHT works, understanding the language that is needed for the subconscious mind in order for it to release certain ideas, blockages, um, trapped emotional energies that sort of get in our way of having a richer experience. So again, I'm so sorry. I don't mean to interrupt, but I think for the listener, they kind of needed that little bit of background. So if you go back to her, you can go ahead and talk about once her energy was cleared, what it was like for her once she got down and went down easily. So
She did. That's what I'm saying. Like, and that's why, in direct comparison too, I've had a number of clients that I've suggested, hey, before you do this, because you have anxiety, because you're going through this, maybe you should, I would refer you to my friend Sally. And no, I'll be fine. I'll just do this. And it's a very different experience. We still get work done, but ultimately they're going to end up coming back for a second session because it took so long to get them under and into their experience and through each of the lives that they needed to see. Once they got to their subconscious, that was fine. Like the system works. It works really well. But man, so this particular person you're talking about, when she came to me, she was a lot more relaxed than probably what she would have been, a couple of months prior,
yeah,
having with you.
when you're spending that kind of money, can you imagine the gal that was my practitioner that tried to put me down was a 12-year veteran and it took her 7 times. And when
Right.
you're, putting that outpour of money that is getting tighter these days, I wish somebody had helped me. And then it took several times after that. So it's almost like the body or the subconscious mind was only going to let a little bit go at the time because of where I was. I had so many blocks. And
Right.
if they can get to you with those blocks removed, the interesting thing we have found is that their questions change. So when they come into the experience, if they just reach out to one of us just for a QHHT experience, we've noticed that they have a set of questions. But when we do the energy work in advance, their questions change. I
There,
just think it's so interesting.
yes. And that's actually one of the points I was going to make is like, I think had she come to just me without doing that work with you, her set of questions would have been way longer for one, and they would have been a lot more askew because she had a list and she's like, oh wait, okay, no, nope, got that answered, that answered, that answered. And so things were so much more time effective. They were like, she honestly, like that anxiety was completely gone in her. She wasn't afraid of what she was going to see. She wasn't afraid of any outcomes. She had that time to get all that energy moved out that was no longer serving her. And so by the time she got to us, or to me, she was able to have an experience where she could see not just the things that you told her about, but even more, because you do past life, like you'll say, okay, well, this is what I'm getting, and this is what I'm seeing, and this is what's coming up. You had a past life, and da 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 da. And then by the time they get to me, that experience 9 times out of 10, they land there and they experience it and see a lot bigger picture. Then when they get the higher self can go, one, we're validating, two, and then just lay it all out. The experience with the SC is phenomenal when they are out of their own way. And then on top of that, they get to see other lives that affect them. And then what I have found with this particular couple is those lives that they experienced and then their SC debunked the things they came in thinking they already knew. That didn't have anything to do with what you had told them, but things that they already knew. And so I was like, okay. I've but their experience, both of them had such an amazing experience, and I'm convinced it's because they had done a lot of work beforehand. Now, does that mean that by the time they get to me, there's no work that's going to be done afterwards? Oh no, oh no, because once you were able to move that initial energy out so they could see things clearly and then get the answers they needed, because one of them was dealing with a lot of physical health problems. that stemmed and rooted back previous life as well as this life, but mostly previous lives that they carried with them and moved. I was able to get to the SC much faster, much more effectively because they were out of their own way and all that energy was moved out and they were no longer afraid of what they were going to see. That's the big thing, I think, Sally, that we don't really talk enough about is when you remove that energy, you're not just removing energy from the past, you're removing fear. Fear of failure, fear of what you're going to see, fear of success, fear, just all the fears. You're helping to move that energy out so they can allow that information to flow through and not be afraid. Because that's, wouldn't you agree that fear is what stands in the way of most of our success anyway?
Yeah, that fear is poison. And I think a lot of times the people that I talk to initially is that I don't know if I'm ready for QHHT because I'm afraid I will divulge something so personal to myself that it would be very embarrassing. And we can't stress this enough. It's almost like there is a HIPAA law in the universe.
I call it my spirit HIPAA laws,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and we can't see the exact why. So it's almost like we give, well, when I tune in for like, for example, this lady who had some trouble um, traveling together with her spouse because she was so fearful that one of them or both of them would die in an accident and leave the children orphaned. And so a real fear. I mean, I think we probably all have that to some degree, just traveling just every day,
Right.
but it doesn't stop us from traveling. And I think with her, it's more than once you release the fear, we kind of tuned into where it got rooted. It was rooted in a past life. But when I was tuning in, it was like, is she ready to allow it to go? And of course, I kept getting no. She had to see it. But the beautiful thing about it was that we removed the fear of seeing it. So she could actually look at what was going on from a disinterested third party
Higher.
position, 30,000, view, 30,000 foot view down. And so she could say, okay, this is what da 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 da. And it's almost like it's practical when it lets it go. It's like, oh yes, this is happening, da 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 da. Does it serve a purpose? Oh no, it just got hung up when they were defragging her computer, that sort of thing.
That's a
Uh,
great way of putting it. That's exactly what happens. It's like it just gets hung up there,
mhm.
the fragments. But then by the time she came to me and did the QHHT, like you said, she was able to see it from a different perspective. And yes, there were tears, there was emotion, but she was like, I don't know why I'm crying. I was like, no worries. It's literally, you are physically releasing now the energy that had been shaken up. Now you're seeing it. Now you can own it and apply it. And we're going to let it just flow right out. She's like, that's cool. She was no longer afraid. That anxiety was gone.
Isn't it beautiful how this works? And it's kind of like, it's like I'm able to tune in and kind of get him there. And oftentimes I can let it go. They're like, oh, well, that makes sense. But many, many, many times when it's a past life energy, they do need to kind of get into it and see it for themselves. And that's where the QHHT, this is why it works really beautiful. Because otherwise, if we hadn't done the energy work, you might have seen her 5 or 6 times before you even got to the point where that was there. And this
Yes.
is kind of like, because you and I are business women and we are kind of bottom line, it's just like, let's just get to the problem and shake it off. This is why I think it works really well. Now they were able to hire us to kind of use the skills that we've learned that anybody can learn, right?
Right.
And then and can get those energies moving so people are spending less time trying to get balanced and their bodies can begin to heal themselves. And
Do you
that's a
want to
beautiful
update on
thing.
that?
Yeah.
Do you want to, I forgot, I haven't even talked to you. As of yesterday, I got an update.
Oh, I love
They
it.
took her idea in the same car, went out of town. She's now planning a trip for her and the family, which
That's
they've
beautiful.
Never, all going in the same vehicle
Yeah, that's
because
amazing.
she'd always made them travel separately. They'd go places, but they'd have to travel different planes, different, but whatever, different cars. And, and, and not once was there a bit of anxiety about it.
That's what I love about combining this modality because it shortens that process and it's so powerful because now the subconscious mind is already prepped and ready to go by the time they get to you. And they're like, all right, bring it on. Let's take a look at it, see what's going on so we can just like let it go. And so that's what happened. And the rebalancing period can take a little bit of time. Some people it comes pretty quickly. Others it can be up to 2 weeks. I've actually seen up to 45 days. But you know what I think is more interesting is the fella in this dynamic. Um, when he came to me, um, such a beautiful soul, big, big energy. Um, I hope one day that he'll come out and say, "Yay, that was me," because his story is so interesting to me. And
Fascinating.
oh my gosh. And as a QHHT practitioners, if you're out there, oh my gosh, we learned something very new. Nothing that I've actually seen on the forum at all when I'm looking at the worldwide forum for us practitioners. And he came to me and he goes, "Have I lived on this earth before?" And as I was tuning into him, I'm like, "No, this is your first rodeo." Well, my wife is, convinced that we've been several past lifetimes together. And I kept saying, "That's not what I'm getting." But you know what? Hey, it's just little Sally. What do I know? I get what I get. This is the energy that I'm picking up. And I'm not going to argue with anybody. You got to put it in the box that makes sense to you, and then move forward or discard it. But I'm pretty good at tuning into the energy I'm picking up. So whatever that energy is, this is what I'm picking up. So he's convinced that he's the star seed and this is his first lifetime. And I was not the only one to tell him that. That actually confirmed for him um, some information that he had already had. And so I'm like, okay, cool. So I knew that he was coming to see you. And I said, well, Lorinda, let me know how it goes. I'm curious about the past lives. She goes, okay, and we just kind of go on from there. And so as they both go through the experience, the wife sees them together in past lives,
Multiple.
multiple past lives. But then something extraordinary happened. And now that we both talked about it, we then got a higher perspective, a very interesting dynamic that I don't know any QHHT practitioner talking about today. So before I take it further, Lorinda, why don't you keeping his identity very private, um, and tell us overall, in general, what you experienced with him, and then we'll go further. I don't want to get into too many details because I don't want him to be identified.
Right. And, well, he and he was actually very open. Is like, this is what I've been told, but also I realize that that may not be this. Like he was very open to that. Like, this may not be the situation, but also I'm pretty sure it is. And I was like, all right, go. I'm excited. I was so excited to see where this went. And keep in mind also, I'm a medium, so I have a very different approach when I go in. So I get messages on things that I can ask and try to bring out information. And so when he was under, he landed right in this really mundane life. And what's interesting is it was the same time period as his wife, with the same name that his wife came up with. And in that life, his wife passed with 2 children that she left behind. Like, it was the same scenario, but just different perspectives, right? And even again, even same time frame, which almost felt, this is a whole other discussion, multidimensional. like different timeline, but different time. If it's hard, again, a whole other discussion. So, but then realizes, then all of a sudden he's like on a spaceship, like downloading, interacting, and they're saying, well, good job, you did good, you were supposed to gather information, thank you, kind of situation. So it's like he had both. And then I said, well, let's see where you go next. Do you want to see where, because he was not really interested in exploring too many of the past lives. He's more of a what next guy. And I respect the heck out of that. There are people that are just like, well, I don't really care what happened in the past. I want to know what can I do now? And if the past gives me some clarity, great. But what's next? What does my higher self have to say next? So I was like, okay, cool. We'll go through a past, one past life. Well, then instead of jumping him to another life, I gave him the option. I said, do you want to go to another life, talk to higher self, or go to the other side, see where you go after this life? It's like, oh, let's go to the other side. Cool. So let's go, not other side. I said, see where you go after you leave this lifetime that we're exploring. He goes over, it's like, it's a very different experience, but he ends up back he's on that spaceship, right? And it kind of goes through that experience. And then they were like, okay. And I said, now where do you go after that? Other side, classroom. He wasn't expecting that either. Goes classroom. And then all of a sudden he's like, oh, wait, I think I'm being sent to like Roman times. I said, do you want to go there? Or do you feel like you want to explore? He's like, no, that's just pretty cool though, because I know I was there. And I was like, okay. So he had been both. He'd been here. And he'd also been a starseed of sorts. But but the thing is, he didn't need those memories necessarily. I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. So he experienced all of it unknowingly, but ultimately that was part of his journey, was the spaceship and the starseed part of it, and the SC confirming, oh yeah, but it's not what he thinks it is.
Right, right.
It's
And
not
that
what
sort
he
of brings me to, and we talked about this. There's so many layers to all this, and the timelines, and time is, people say time doesn't exist. Well, it does exist, but it just doesn't exist the way we understand it. I mean, here we're very linear, and if you know anything about Anita Moorjani, who went through the past life experience or went into a coma and was on the other side, because it's life, as beingness is like a tapestry, and there are many threads running through that tapestry, and the rug exists all at once, and you are either on this thread or you're on this thread. It's very interesting how she presents it. But the thing that sort of, and that's, I think, kind of what happened here with him, that he could almost like bifurcate and be into almost interdimensionally between two places. And like you said, we're going to get to that later in a different conversation. But the thing that I think the reason why all of us kept reading that he was a starseed and that he wasn't getting or didn't have in his mind a past life is because he was creating what we call an overlay, a big shell. And it's almost like you create this overlay. I think, therefore I know I am, and you create it as you're here. Not that you created it in a prior life planning session, but just going through your life experience, and you get that sense, that feeling, oh, I've been this thing over here. I'm this star seed and I've never been here before. And that narrative takes hold, right? And as it begins to take hold, it builds and builds and builds. Because we do live in a quantum world, and we have programmable computers, our mind body spirit complex, we can absolutely create for ourselves whatever narrative we decide we need to have our present life experience,
I
which is
mean,
good.
how many Napoleons have we met? How many
Well,
Queen the first
yeah,
have
well, that's a different one. That's the
we?
but this is the
I know.
overlay where it's like the ego is like, ooh, starseed, that's cool. And you and I were talking before, it's like Sally wants to be Abigail Adams. And I want to be Abigail Adams so bad that I create this overlay around me that when people who have the ability to read energy, they're going to see the overlay. And so, and usually you can penetrate it, but when it becomes, like you said, the energy is so large, so ginormous, that this creation was so big that the only thing I could see when I tuned in, what past life do you have that most affects you today, was this starseed being. I couldn't penetrate it. I think the cautionary tale is as QHHT practitioners and those looking to have the experience of QHHT is be mindful to ask the question, is this an overlay? Is this an imprint? Is this a blueprint? And so the overlay is something that we create here because we want, just like, oh, Abigail Adams is just one of my heroines that I would aspire to be. That I really felt like, oh, if I could just be her. And if I believed it so strong that anybody psychic would say, oh, I think you were Abigail Adams, because I'm projecting that out. Now, that doesn't mean I went in and got her page from her book. That's an entirely different thing. That's an imprint.
That's imprint, right?
Mhm. But when I created that persona or adopt it into my own energy, that becomes that overlay. And so as you are going through the QHHT experience, make sure you are asking your QHHT practitioner, if I see something, that is my past life, ask the question, is it an overlay? Is it an imprint? And is it a blueprint? And the imprint is, say, Abigail Adams had an experience where she separated from her husband for a long time, and they barely see each other. And she's isolated in Massachusetts, and how does she get through that experience? Well, me coming in as Sally, I might have an experience where I'm going to be separated from my spouse for long periods of time, but I've had no past life experience to prepare me for that emotional upheaval of being so isolated alone in an area with several children to raise by myself in a world where a woman can't make money because a woman's not allowed to work other than, as a servant for somebody else. And how am I going to make that work? How am I going to jostle all this? And what happens to my husband when he dies? And how long would it take for me to know he's dead? These are some of the fears that Abigail Adams had, and I can create that energy. So I can go as a being prior to coming into Sally's experience and go to the life book library, if you will, just for simplicity,
The
and
Dewey
take
Decimal.
a page. Yeah, take a page out of that book and say, I'm going to imprint it on my mind and my spirit. And then I have something to intuit by. My gut feeling can be, it's almost like a guidance system, almost like a map that helps me through some of that more difficult time. I didn't live as Abigail Adams, but I borrowed part of her energy to get me through a time that my soul or spirit wanted to experience when it came in as Sally. Now, if I take it further back, the blueprint are the actual experiences that I've had as my beingness. Me being Sally, me being Jane, me being Katie, you know, me being these other people, and whoever else in the hundreds of thousands of years or whatever, and wherever. That is actually the blueprint. So every life experience that you have, it layers another line on your blueprint, just like building a house. Just like building a house, you have a blueprint. So those are the differences. And I think with this guy, um, he did have some experiences as a starseed, but that overlay was getting so thick with him that nothing else could be seen, right?
Right.
And so it's through the skill and your abilities to remote view that you're like, no, there's more here, and understanding the different layers that we go through that most QHHT practitioners are not asking. And
Right.
honestly, Lorinda, I think it's more important to figure out which energy is it? Is it the overlay? Is it an imprint? Is it a blueprint? Because it is all part of defragging the computer so we can get in and balance our lives and go through our healing processes and able to move forward so we can experience this life in the fullest potentiality we can.
That is exactly what I was just thinking. I was like, and also we came here in this human embodiment, in this meat suit, to experience this life, not to be so hung up on what we used to be that we forget to embrace this life and fulfill these goals. And so it's great for informational purposes. It can give us answers, but we can't live in that what used to be or what may be. Because I can tell you, when you first said, I'm going to be sending you a client, I've already done this work. I'm like, okay, cool. And you're like, and this is what I got. My reaction was, oh, cool, because I could see what you were talking about psychically, higher self to higher self. So for anybody who doesn't understand the difference between psychic and medium, really quick tutorial. Psychically is when mental mind to mental mind. I can read a person, a meat suit. Okay. That sometimes that means I'm reading their own narrative, their facade, their overlay. But then all of a sudden I hear my guide go, no, just wait. And I said that to you, and you're like, no, I don't know. And I'm like, I don't either. So I guess we're just going to leave it up to the cosmos. And both you and I both have learned that if you get one thing and I get another, chances are there's validity on both ends, and it's somewhere in the middle. So we've learned to just let spirit and the power of the universe balance it out and show us in due time. And so I was really fascinated because mediumistically, I knew there was more to it, but I didn't say that to the client because you and I both know with QHHT and any kind of regression, you don't want to imply anything. You don't want to plant any seeds. There was a lot of things that I just was like, as I was thinking, I would just write it down. I always put a column that says my thoughts. And then I just keep it to myself and go, okay, cool. I can't wait till afterwards because I'm going to see how this plays out. But for me to see here, I can absolutely validate that I could see that facade, but not understanding it was a facade until afterward. When my guides back here were behind the mask or behind the facade going, hey, yeah, no, there's more. But we'll get to that later. It's fine.
Yeah, and it really helps the fact that you are doing more of a remote viewing, which is a little bit beyond just the mediumship and the psychic.
Yes.
This is the ability to hone in the energy in the room and see it for what it is. It's almost like peeling away the layers, and you're seeing the whole tapestry versus just that thread. And so the person may be focused on the thread, and you're sitting back kind of looking at the whole tapestry. And that
Yes.
is that remote viewing part of it.
And there are times I even say, hey, look over to the right. What do you see?
Mm-hmm.
And that's usually something that's important. Like they're focused so much on one thing straight ahead, or they're focused on a feeling. And I'm like, but look over there. So that's where that remote viewing can really come in handy. And let's just be honest, it's just cool.
Oh, it's very cool.
It's a cool experience I love this work. Sally, I just love this work.
I know. I hear you, sister. I love it too. Wouldn't give it up for
Ultimately,
anything.
and I can't wait. And ultimately, when this client came out, they were like, wow, okay. So there was stuff that I expected, but then also so much more, and realizing, and oh yeah, my higher self did kind of call me out.
Oh, definitely. I think that surprises a lot of people because people come in with this idea like Sally wanting to be Abigail Adams and getting mad at you for telling me no, I'm not, and then the higher self comes out like, oh, come on, wake up. Here's what it is. This is what happened. And it's so interesting because as QHHT practitioners, we'll watch people argue with their ego through this whole experience. It's like they're talking out of two tongues. The higher self is saying one thing, the ego saying something else, and they're like going at it. You're like,
What's funny is
okay.
you and I can identify, because we're trained to do so in the years of experience. We know which is talking.
Mm-hmm.
No, the energy shifts, and there's a tonality in the voice that will change when it is the person versus
Oh,
the
it
the
has its own
subconscious.
language, and it's so interesting because it's
Yes.
a universal language. And that's the other thing I want to kind of touch on because we can get off in the weeds so easy.
So easy.
Um, hey, once you go down this rabbit hole, there's like, oh my gosh, there's so much to look at and to learn. And you're like, oh my goodness, and we're like grasping at all these straws because it is
Honestly,
cool.
we could do these videos like daily and still have things to talk about nonstop for a year. Like that's so much.
Absolutely. And so, what I find so interesting is that the subconscious mind, when the person begins to argue with themselves, because they are so rooted in an idea that I was Cleopatra. I know it because everybody's told me. And I have images of,
And I've had
you know,
dreams. Yeah.
I've had dreams, I've had this. The other thing that QHHT practitioners miss often, I think, is this an energy? Because everything's infinite mind, right? And
Mhm.
so consciousness does not exist inside the head. I mean, I think there's been enough scientific studies that, we can put that to bed now that the brain is a receiver. And so if you are picking up information, especially as you're going to sleep, those two places that Dolores Cannon talks about, as you're waking up, as you're going to sleep, you're in that light theta, deep alpha state. If there is a thread of energy, a beam of energy, you might pick it up just like any radio station. You're Arecibo at that point. You're picking up all this stuff in this infinite cosmos, and you might, you know, receive it, and you're like, oh, I was Cleopatra. When it's just information that's out there that you begin to stream in, and then your ego personalizes it. And that's where we have to kind of break apart with our clients is
Yes.
what is ego and what is spirit, your spirit, your soul energy, and break that apart. Because how cool would it be? I was Cleopatra. I mean, who would want to be that? Because I wouldn't want to live that
Yeah.
lifetime. But
I feel like that didn't end well. So I don't know that I'd want to be
no,
Cleopatra.
no, no, and I don't like snakes, so that would not be good for me. But and you know what I'm saying is that you can hone in on a frequency and it can stream into you, and then your ego can grab a hold of it and say, "Oh, that was me. I knew it." So
Yeah.
you're
And that's what, and even yes, I'm just going to leave it at that. I agree. I agree, because we don't know, and as practitioners, I feel like the more aware we are that these are possibilities, the more we can ask those questions when they are under. I Again, I keep my little list of my thoughts over here, that I never say before we go into the session. And I'll write down, there's a bunch of questions I'll write down, but I will actually, I refer to myself as an advocate. I am their advocate. I'm going to get as many answers as possible for them. And if that means I have to say, okay, were they really Cleopatra? Or was this an imprint energy? Is this blueprint energy? Is this an overlay? Is this something they embraced when they were younger and just kind of took on that energy and or were
Or
they
just
told
that passing
something?
energy going through the ether, you
Right.
know?
And also, caution, buyer beware. Not every psychic who says they're a psychic is actually psychic. So
Well,
just
I
because
think we're all
tell you
psychic.
something,
I would have to disagree there. I think we're all psychic. It's just
right?
um, people get in their own way,
But there's
and they buy into
so
their narratives. Yeah.
but there's also an element of not every psychic is an ethical trained psychic.
There you go. Bingo.
They might pick up on something about you and they're going to interpret it and then so if somebody tells you something early in life like this is going to happen, and I've done it too, it may not play out like what they predict. It may not play out the same way. So you have to be open to, just because they see it a certain way doesn't mean it's 100% concrete fact.
Right. And that's why making sure that your practitioner is asking those right questions. So if they're not, make sure that that's on your list of questions. Is it an overlay? Is it a blueprint? Is it an imprint? Or is it just some stream of energy I'm picking up in the Ethernet? Right. Other thing I want to kind of stress, and it's kind of a side note, but I think it's worth noting. There's a quote social media influencer out there. I'm not going to name names, but this gentleman believes he's been all these famous warriors throughout time. He was, Caesar, he was this, he was that, he was, general after general throughout time, and that his life path as a warrior. Well, he might have a life path as a warrior, but he's done the regression in his remote viewing that shows him that he was, all these famous generals throughout time. And I'm looking at that, I'm like, that's really unusual that you are each one of these pivotal people in history. So
Right.
what's really going on? And I think he might have had one or two where it is genuinely in his blueprint. But before he came into this life experience, because he became a Navy SEAL, before he came into this life experience, he went to that library and he took those imprints out of all those pages. So it prepare him to be a Navy SEAL today, right? So but then, he's out there claiming that he experienced all these past lives. And I'm thinking it's kind of sad in a way because, the people who could have helped him understand that a little bit better, um, kind of misguided him because it's not like, I think what I want to say here, his intent is to be genuine, right? The intent there is to share what he has experienced, right? And his intent isn't to mislead. But how do you get clarity for yourself if you are one, you don't fully understand what it is you're seeing, and you have people that are not qualified sort of supporting you in that, I hate to say fantasy, but almost like a fantasy. So I think if you truly want healing, if you truly are looking to grow spiritually, if you're truly looking to get a balance of the mind, the body, and the spirit, then it's important to know the truth. It's not and it's not like what you create. It's what is real and true. And that is making sure because you can go to anybody and you can have them help you believe anything, right? You could say to me, "Yes, Sally, you are Cleopatra." Whatever. You know what I'm saying? "Oh, sure, go ahead, believe that." Like to prove, disprove that. But I'm off over here allowing my ego to go, you know, out because I was the queen of Egypt, albeit not that it ended well. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Or Abigail Adams. It doesn't serve my higher goals to
Yes.
progress
As a
buying
human
to a
in this life.
narrative that is not correct, right?
Right.
And not that we are 100% correct. This is where when Lorinda and I work together, we're reading these energies, we're helping you put the pieces together. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the person has to intuit it themselves. Does it make sense to them? Because truth will always resonate and
Mhm.
falsehoods will eventually break down and fall away.
Right. Yeah. Because those falsehoods are based in fear, aren't they? In fear.
Mm,
Mhm.
mm, mm.
Mhm. Again, a whole other YouTube discussion. A whole other discussion.
We'll get to that eventually. We'll get to that eventually.
So
So
any um so I guess any before we like wrap up here, any other, I don't know, any other final thoughts on and advice for people as they're searching for the right QHHT? Because I mean, yeah, we're awesome, but what if we may not vibe with someone, or
yeah,
if someone local to be able to do QHHT in person? Because again, friends, QHHT needs to be done in person. BQH, I personally am certified. I can do past life regression and healing, quantum healing virtually, because I have training for that. But if you want a full QHHT, it's got to be in person. So if you want help finding a local practitioner, we're happy to help out, make some recommendations. You can go to the Dolores Cannon website as well and look for your area. But don't be afraid if you're going to spend this money, because this is not just a $20 cheap adventure. There's dollars involved, because we have a lot of training and a lot of energy that we've put into this modality. You want to be armed with questions. Make sure you're going in and asking those hard questions. And you may have a practitioner that's got a level 3 and that just is not that in tune, knows all the words to say, and you might have a level 1 who's got all the other modalities and are able to answer those questions. So don't get hung up on the labels necessarily, but ask the questions. What are your thoughts on overlays versus blueprints versus imprints? What are your thoughts on, so don't be afraid to ask the practitioner questions before choosing one.
or make sure that those are the questions in your questions. Is this
Yes.
past life? Is it something that I experienced? Is this my blueprint? Is it my imprint? Is it my whatever? Yeah, asking those questions is going to be important. I want people to be comfortable with working with us. Um, and if not us, then find somebody, because you don't have to stay stuck. If not us, find somebody. Um, we both do quantum healing hypnosis. We both have the remote viewing skills. We both can do the quantum healing. So, but we have learned it works best when you and I team up, and it
Does.
does go a
Does.
whole lot quicker. And I am finding, just in the feedback that we're getting from our clients that we do work together, that their experience was so rich. All right, well, we can go ahead and wrap it up for today's Energetically Speaking. Lorinda, where can people find you?
www.spiritmessagesfromtheotherside.com. I got to work on that. I got to shorten that somehow, but also I'm on TikTok as Lorinda Carr Medium, all the social medias. But if you go to my website, all that's there.
Awesome. And you can reach me at sallyknop.com. You can see my name written there below in case you're like, how do you spell that? sallyknop.com. You can reach out. Very simple site. You can go and look at the different modalities that I also offer, and you can book online. So at the end of the day, Lorinda and I are looking to find ways to help ignite the superhuman in you. Thanks for watching.